Thank you, Julia. Good day to everyone. So we are having a virtual conference right now. I don't see which is the camera I have to watch. Is that one? Okay, so good. Hello, everybody. Even though you have to look that way because otherwise we will be really uncomfortable. In any case, good day to everybody. I hope we are finding you in good health. That's the most important thing. I'm Enrique Villamore, as my colleague was mentioning, Director of SCB-RAC, one of the organizations that are the implementing partners of SwitchMed program, which is funded by the Director General for Neighborhood and Enlargement Negotiations of the European Commission. So welcome to this second day of the fourth edition of SwitchMed Connect. I'm delighted to meet you again, even though this time, as I was saying, we can just do it virtually. Following previous editions of Connect, today's discussions will address the challenges that the Mediterranean region is facing in the transition to an economic and social development that bases on sustainable patterns of consumption and production, as well as on circular economy approaches. And most importantly, the solutions that can be brought and which are provided every day by a multitude of important actors, including all of you. Before starting, we are glad to convey the welcoming message from Teresa Jordà, Minister of Climate Action, Food and Rural Agenda of the Government of Catalonia, partner and donor of SwitchMed. So please, just let's go on with the message from Ms. Jordà. Thank you.
Benvolguts a totes i a tots. És un honor poder adreçar-vos avui unes paraules per donar el tret de sortida a aquesta quarta edició del SwitchMed Connect. En primer lloc, vull començar agraint a la Comissió Europea el seu paper clau en la transició cap a una economia o cap a les economies netes i circulars als països de la Mediterrània a través del finançament del programa SwitchMed. Gràcies a aquest programa, que sens dubte ha esdevingut una iniciativa cabdal, hem rebut un importantíssim recolzament en el nostre camí per assolir diversos dels 17 objectius de desenvolupament sostenible, com són principalment el de garantir modalitats sostenibles de consum i producció, recolzar un treball decent i creixement econòmic i fomentar alhora la indústria i la innovació. També agrair, com no pot ser d'una altra manera, als socis del programa, a l'Organització de les Nacions Unides pel Desenvolupament Industrial, a la Divisió d'Economia del Programa de les Nacions Unides del Medi Ambient i també al propi Centre d'Activitat Regional per a la Producció i el Consum Sostenible. Gràcies immenses per l'excel·lent treball conjunt desenvolupant durant més de 7 anys, i aviat s'és dit, en l'execució de les activitats del programa. Ens sentim profundament orgullosos de formar-ne part, i això és així pel ferm compromís que tant el departament que tinc l'honor d'encapçalar com el conjunt del Govern de Catalunya tenim d'accelerar la transició cap a una economia circular en el centre d'un desenvolupament sostenible i, evidentment, inclusiu. Ho tenim clar, volem un sector sostenible, el volem transformador i basat en la bioeconomia circular. Propi i arrelat al territori. També el volem just, equitatiu i cohesionat, saludable i, òbviament, de confiança. En definitiva, volem una Catalunya amb un model mediambiental sostenible, innovador i integral. Vam ser pioners en la introducció de les energies renovables als 80, quan el primer aerogenerador de tot el territori estatal va col·locar-se a Vilopriu. Volem tornar a ser capdavanters. Tenim el deure i la responsabilitat de canviar el model actual i caminar cap a un model productiu sostenible i de consum responsable. També impulsar la transició energètica cap a les energies 100% renovables, lliure d'oligopolis i d'interessos econòmics. Som conscients que com a societat i també com a país tenim reptes en matèria climàtica i mediambiental, que no podem esperar. No els defugim, aquests reptes, però els necessitem o ens necessitem a totes i a tots per arribar als objectius per assolir. I precisament el SwitchMed Connect és una oportunitat excepcional i única per enfortir els contactes, crear noves sinergies, intercanviar coneixements i catalitzar innovacions socials i ecològiques pel nostre país. Aprofitem-la al màxim. Apostem fortament per construir partenariats i aliances estratègiques per fer realitat l'Agenda 2030 i en particular els ODS. Apostem fortament per avançar plegats de la mà. Espero, doncs, que el programa hagi contribuït a materialitzar les vostres idees innovadores, els vostres projectes i les vostres aspiracions i que el SwitchMed Connect pugui finalment veure la llum. Per acabar, us vull animar a que seguiu contribuint amb el vostre incansable treball a transitar cap a economies verdes, circulars i socialment inclusives al Mediterrani. Ens teniu al costat. Desitjo, doncs, que el SwitchMed Connect sigui tot un èxit. Moltes gràcies a totes i a tots.
We thank you very much, Teresa, for these encouraging words, which paved the way for our first session, counting on the presence of a distinguished panel of speakers. This first session is called Together We Rise for several reasons, one of which being that while we all know the urgency to act quickly towards a transition to a Mediterranean society based on sustainable patterns of consumption and production, we also know that we must do it together and adopt a multi-layer approach and one common vision in the region. And this partnership approach is the real strength of SwitchMed program, which has allowed us for the last 7 years to build a healthy and sustainable ecosystem in which change is not only possible, but is constantly brought about with an intersectional approach, working with policymakers, industries, business support organizations, entrepreneurs, and civil society organizations. As many of you know, it would be complicated to summarize in few words what SwitchMed is, and especially what it represents for the community of people rowing for a sustainable and socially inclusive Mediterranean economy. But in a nutshell, SwitchMed is a two-phase program, the second of which is underway until 2023. SwitchMed is the alliance of 3 key actors, namely industry, entrepreneurs, and policymakers that work together to progress to sustainable and circular economies in our beloved region. While the first phase of SwitchMed has laid the foundations for demonstrating the economic and social value of transition to SCP, the second one is capitalizing on the results of the pilot actions, scaling up its impact, and enabling stakeholders and the beneficiaries to apply, replicate, and leverage points for systemic positive changes. In the efforts made by the Mediterranean countries to develop the necessary measures for circular economy, SwitchMed aims at providing them with assistance at different levels. Firstly, with implementation of highly relevant and practical demo actions, engaging industries, startups, and key players from the sustainable business ecosystem. Secondly, supporting the design and development of common policy and regulatory frameworks, assisting national programs, and empowering public institutions. Finally, we codify impacts and transfer knowledge to existing regional policy frameworks and mechanisms to nurture the degree of political sustainability of the project results. To concretize these remarks, let avail myself on the opportunity to mention few examples of activities implemented under SwitchMed. We have a great impact on decision-making, policy design, and progress. First, thanks to the methodology MedTest, the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, UNIDO, leading partner of SwitchMed, made the business case for a resource-efficient and cleaner production, and is now deepening its model into specific value chains to demonstrate that significant savings could be achieved for the business as for the environment. On the other hand, through our mandate as component of the Mediterranean Action Plan from the United Nations Environment Programme, at SCP ROC, we have contributed to support the 21 Mediterranean countries that are members of the Barcelona Convention in the adoption of several common policy and regulatory decisions integrating circular economy and the support to the creation and development to green entrepreneurs as strategic approaches to protect the environment of our common region. Last but not the least, our colleagues of the Economic Division of UNEP continue working intensively in supporting the SwitchMed beneficiary countries in progressing in the implementation of their SCP national action plans. Now, to reflect on the policy uptakes of SwitchMed activities and to analyze most relevant regional policy frameworks and align SwitchMed strategies, we have invited today three key representatives of institutions leading sustainability transition in the region. We will ask them to highlight policy developments and learnings with the potential to trigger sustainability and how these translate in real changes, especially for Southern Mediterranean countries. So I'm glad to introduce Ms. Tatiana Hema, coordinator of the UN Environment Mediterranean Action Plan, Mr. Patrick Wegert, Senior Policy Officer at the European Union Directorate General for Environment, and Ms. Alessandra Sensi, Head of Sector, Environment and Blue Economy at the Water, Environment and Blue Economy Division of the Secretariat of the Union for the Mediterranean. However, before listening to our guest speakers, I'm very glad to introduce you Professor Rim Ayadi, our keynote speaker of today. Professor Rim Ayadi is an economist and international expert on inclusive and sustainable socioeconomic models and sustainable finance. She is professor at Business School of the City University of London and founder and president of the Mediterranean Economies Association, EMEA. EMEA is an independent research institution and forum of debate that provides innovative, forward-looking thinking and political, socioeconomic, and financial integrated analysis on the Euro-Mediterranean region with a focus on sustainable socioeconomic models. So please, Professor Ayadi, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much, Enrique, for inviting me to this very important annual conference of SwitchMed. And I think this is an impressive initiative, especially within the context of the COP26 being held in Glasgow currently. So my talk is based on the EMEA and the Euro-Mediterranean Network for Economic Studies Research on the blue transition scenario. So what this blue transition scenario we developed for the Mediterranean region, emphasizing the centrality of the Mediterranean Sea as a meeting point between Europe, the Mediterranean, and Africa. So we base our analysis and assessment on the TRIS model for development in a context of global transitions, mainly driven by digitalization, automation, which already started before COVID-19. Adding to this, the new transition that we are living in currently, which is the healthcare transition, that we need to go through and forcefully. Now, the TRIS economic model is an acronym for some guiding principles, which we already mentioned a few of them, that should really drive the development to this new model. First of all, transparency, which is aimed to build the trust, which is based on greater accountability of past and present decisions, actions, and intentions. Second, responsibility, which manage the possible intended and unintended consequences in the future and reflect on their ethical acceptability. So this is important also in terms of the consumption and the production processes. Also, inclusiveness, to take into account what is societally desirable to the current generations. I think we have to think about it much more forcefully as well. And then sustainability, everybody knows, to take into account what is left for future generations, generation endowment, which is the use of natural resources, which are scarce. And this is scarcity is a very important element for economics. And then also the preservation of biodiversity and environmental related issues. Now, the TRIS models takes into account the 4 global transitions, which could either lead to a conservative future, which we call it Horizon 1, or a transformative future, which is Horizon 3. Now, why we put 1 and 3, it's something to debate. Now, for a Horizon 2050. Now, the governance transition, this is essential. We cannot go to a transition without governance and changing our thinking about leadership. The top-down approach, which is really fundamental for the Horizon 1, which is the conservative approach, it has to move into a kind of a horizontal, democratic, flat, cooperative, built on transparency. Governance, which is built on transparency. Access to data, access to evidence. And this will move us, in reality, to the Horizon 3. Societal challenges, it's really try to move from an addicted, induced consumption, and also production in a way, to more responsible forms of consumption and production, and healthier lifestyles. Green transition is from extractive, acquisitive resources model into a circular way, and also that use or better use energy and natural resources. And then finally, all of these three transitions will move us into the economic transition, which is from a dominant corporate capitalism based on really extreme profit-making into a distributed, inclusive capitalism, which goes beyond really profit and think about the society as a whole. Now, from these horizons up to 2050, we're moving into innovation, breakthroughs, and daring pathways. And this is the time to do it. Strategic agendas and policy roadmaps to drive the four transition into the Horizon 2050. This is what we call the blue transition scenario. So just to make it clear, which is really a vision also for Europe, Mediterranean, and Africa, and the integration between the three regions. Now, this model is totally aligned with the UN SDGs. Currently, EMEA is also working on the interaction between the four principles and the UN SDGs to be able to measure practically what is stress inside of it. And then we also extended the analysis, and I'm going to skip this because we don't have time this morning, on the resilience. Resilience, it's essential for the trace development model when is faced with extreme shocks. And what we're living today, the concept of resilience is essential for the transition concepts. Now, the transitions are by nature uncertain. And when faced with extreme shocks, uncertainty increases and risk does too. But then risk is part of the uncertainty that we can measure. And we can measure and prepare ourselves for the future of those transitions and the acceleration of them. Now, just something to keep in mind, and I suggest that SwitchMed could also work on the concept of resilience, because it's extremely important for the future. Now, I'm going to, in my next slide, to show you in reality what we want to talk about, which is the green transition, circularity, biodiversity preservation, and post-carbon cities, which are relevant to the topic of this conference, but I might skip the last one. Now, this is very interesting. These are tables and graphs that are based on our foresight exercise assessment for the Horizon 2030, applying these four principles and transitions I mentioned. Overall, if the countries in the Mediterranean would have moved prior to COVID-19 to a clean transition scenario forcefully at top level, in line with the principles I shared previously, then these countries would move from a polluting fossil fuel to renewable, and also their energy mix would fit into the clean transition scenario. With that, if you look at the assessment 2030-2050, you will see that the GDP, employment, and production will be adjusted based on the intensive use of fossil fuel, the investment, domestic and FDI, they engage in, and the political commitment and willingness to embark in the journey. So practically, if you see here, you have the baseline. The baseline is practically the fossil fuel, the yellow one, and then the renewable, so the change of the mix to others, is the red one, as you can see here. And this is important, that the energy mix is changed as soon as possible, if it is not the case. And the quicker the countries engage into this changing, so it's a top-down approach, the quicker they can prepare their economic and social systems into the transition in terms of GDP growth and also employment generation. And also in terms of the production changes. You can see here the different sectors which generally apply the intensive use of fossil fuel, and then you can see that all the negatives means that they will lose certain production changes based on the, as compared to the baseline. But in reality, the quicker we move into this transition, the lower these negative trends you will see in the future. Now, I prepared some recommendations to accelerate this green transition, mainly global agreements on taxonomy and finance and trade. This is essential. This has to be enforced, and enforced as soon as possible. ESG standard and eco labels, not for greenwashing, but really for implementing and accelerating the green transition and clean transition for companies and banks. For example, nowadays, banks, they should be imposed the green asset ratio and public disclosure on the asset side and also liability side whenever they go into funding in the markets in terms of the green bond. Now, it's also important because this is a long-term transition where banks cannot be only left alone. The market cannot be left alone. We need to have a private-public partnership where the risk is shared. As I mentioned, in transitions, risk increase, uncertainty increase, risk increase. So we need to have collaborative ways to manage this uncertainty and risk. And this is why I mentioned the guarantees. Guarantee of green bonds, use, for example, of IMF, EU funds, World Bank guarantees for sustainable recovery based on the green transition. And also, I think it's important now on the WTO to go into agreed standard on sustainable trade. What is sustainable trade? So we cannot be trading unsustainable goods and services. And finally, authority, it should be an authority to monitor the green transition. Now, efficient use of resources, I'm not going to dwell into this. I think all of you know that we need to tackle water scarcity in the Mediterranean, increase use of renewable energy, as I mentioned, limit extraction of material only for essential use. This is important. And also enhance smart digital solutions and monitoring. I think the digitalization has to help us really to enhance transparency and to enhance efficiency. Third, circularity of processes, promote a zero-waste culture, value of reused material. I think we need to impose a value on reused material. This also gives incentives to the players to ensure that this is happening. Favor green business models, enhance smart digital solution also to streamline processes and reduce excessive polluting consumption patterns. So I don't know how much time I still have, maybe little, 2 minutes. So the second topic I want to delve into is the biodiversity. Okay, biodiversity is key core into the blue economy, whatever we call blue economy. We need to think of the ocean as part of biodiversity, the resources in the ocean as part of biodiversity. But it's not only, it's also lands and forests. And I'm not going to dwell into lands and forests, but I'll go into the sea now. Again, the same, global agreement to preserve biodiversity, appropriate standards and labels for private sector. This is important. So we need to think equivalently as ESG type of labels. Something else, but something similar. So this is something that I invite the research community to delve into it. Also guarantee biodiversity bonds, use of IMF the same, to preserve biodiversity. And authority to monitor the preservation of biodiversity. And this is something that should be on the agenda of the COP26, 27, and for the future. Efficient use of resources. Now again, I think we need to recognize that our resources are scarce in the sea, in the oceans, and also in the forests and so on. So tackle the unsustainable fishing and hunting, reevaluation models based on the capacity of the species to sequester carbon and also protect the extinct species. I think this is also extremely key. And there is research by the IMF which is really working on these valuation models that integrate the capacity of the species to sequester carbon, and then in reality, this helps the acceleration of the greening of the economy. So I think we also have to review the economic activities overall within the blue economy, for example, that are destructing coastal ecosystems and habitat, and also the forest, but the forest, we are not debating this today, and also excessive extracting of the marine resources. And also we need to preserve, or I would say promote, the regeneration projects, like, for example, the ones to recover damaged and endangered reef systems, or to recover, for example, the lost green areas in the forest due to man-made and natural fire. Now, again, for me, very important to develop new valuation models, because value is important. You have to put value on things, to revalue the natural capital based on marine resources and ecosystem services. And finally, it's to integrate green transition, circularity, and biodiversity. That's it, I'm done. And integrate this green transition and circular principle into economic activities that involve biodiversity in oceans and land. So they are not separate, they are integrated. I think I would stop here. So this is the part that I wanted to share with you. But thank you very much for your attention, and happy to discuss.
Thank you very much, Professor Ayadi, for this presentation on the trees development, and also to introduce us on the critical aspects at the long term on the transition scenarios to green economy, and also in identifying the economic challenges in trying to attain this objective. So after listening to Professor Ayadi, I would like now to welcome Ms. Tatiana Gema, coordinator of the UNEP Mediterranean Action Plan. So please, Tatiana, the floor is yours.
Good morning, Enrique. Good morning, dear colleagues, dear participants. I'm very pleased to be with you. Unfortunately, I'm attending another meeting, so I hope that the condition of my participation in this very important event that we do in the framework of the work that SCP-RAC and the SwitchMed project, SwitchMed Connect, is satisfactory. I hope that you hear me well, and there is no noise that you are hearing from here. So thank you very much again. This is an important milestone. Being around the table all together of a community that is growing every year thanks to the work being done in the region at national level as well by SCP-RAC and its partners is very important for the MAP Barcelona Convention. You are aware that in the last 10 years, MAP has developed tremendously the dimension of sustainable consumption and production, and now recently in circular economy approaches, thanks to the leadership of the work of the SCP-RAC. And this dimension is covering several aspects: policy, programmatic, operational, support to the contracting parties and Mediterranean countries. And I cannot deny the very important role, an instrumental role that other partner organizations are giving to promoting this agenda in the region. Let me start first by the European Union that has supported a number of projects and giving a political support, a technical support to this agenda in the region. Union for the Mediterranean, I cannot leave our colleagues, partners for the SwitchMed project, UNIDO, and the UNEP economy division in Paris, but above all, you, the contracting parties, the Mediterranean countries, the national networks that have been very closely supporting and contributing to the process, making sure that this community is growing, this agenda is well understood and implemented at country level. Now, from the MAP perspective, I'm very pleased to inform you that we are going to organize the next meeting of the contracting parties in Antalya, Turkey, in December this year, and we are going on a very substantive agenda on sustainable consumption and production and circular economy for the first time. We expect our contracting parties to approve the new midterm strategy 2022-2027 of the UNEP MAP Barcelona Convention that is bringing to the agenda of the Mediterranean a very important and ambitious commitment in view of further progressing with regard to the achieving the SDGs, the relevant SDGs in our region, the SDGs that are relevant of the MAP system. I'm going to provide a little bit more detail about the MTS a little bit later, but what I'd like to focus at this stage is there are also some other important decisions that we are planning to submit to the next meeting of the contracting parties. Let me start by very important development in the technical annexes of the LBS protocol of the Barcelona Convention, which is one of the most important regulatory instrument of the MAP Barcelona Convention system. And I'm very pleased to inform you that they've been quite substantively revised in order to introduce, maybe for the first time in international law, a number of very, very important provisions related to sustainable consumption and production and circular economy approaches. We also are going to go to the next meeting of the contracting parties with a very important draft decision on how to promote green circular businesses. And I believe that you, the community of SwitchMed at national and regional level, should be very proud of it, because in fact, it reflects the work that we have done for years. It reflects the work of all partners contributing to the SwitchMed, and we are very confident that our contracting parties would approve this decision that would allow at country level to create the necessary conditions for further developing and strengthening green businesses. So these are very important elements that we believe that will make this dimension in the UNEP MAP Barcelona Convention, putting it at a different level, much higher level, from policy perspective and regulatory perspective, and of course support your work at country level. Now, let me come to the new midterm strategy. As I said, the new midterm strategy is conceived in a context of decade for action that the entire world, including the Mediterranean countries, and in particular our contracting parties, including the European Union, are struggling for implementation of Agenda 2030, SDG 14, SDG 6, SDG 12, that are very much related to the sustainable consumption and production and circular economy approaches. These elements are fully streamlined. Of course, the intention is for us to contribute to the achievement of good environmental status in the Mediterranean, which cannot be achieved without upstream measures to prevent pollution, to maximize resource efficiency, to switch to the green economies, to switch to the green business, and not to mention how to overcome the consequences of the COVID impact situation. So the strategy itself will have a number of programs, and I'm very pleased to inform you that SCP, circular economy, they are very well taken into account, and important activities will be undertaken in the framework of the new midterm strategy to support this agenda in the region. In the program on pollution, in the program of efficient use of resources, in the program of the governance, in the program of monitoring and assessment, in the program of climate change, and in the program of biodiversity. So almost everywhere, a strong dimension on SCP will be totally considered in the new midterm strategy, expected to be approved by the next meeting of the contracting parties. So having said that, I also would like to say that we also have done many other things at operational level. You are very much aware that there is a lot of work done in promoting the green businesses, thanks to the support from the SwitchMed projects, one after each other. There is also a number of awards that have been also developed as a very important stimulus in promoting green businesses. We know that we have awards, so it's very important, and we believe that this is also an opportunity for many actors at national level to benefit from this kind of stimulus and this kind of work in order to make this agenda work for the region and grow from one year to another. So without taking much of your time, Enrique, and of the colleagues, I would say that we are very proud with the work that we have done. We are very much committed to work very closely with our partners and European Union, that is a very strong pillar in promoting this agenda in the Mediterranean region. And of course, UFM, UNIDO, UNEP, and any other partners at regional, sub-regional, and national level in order to go together and to work together for this green switch in our region, in order to build back better, as we say in UNEP, and to promote sustainable development and achieve the Agenda 2030 in the Mediterranean. So this I wanted to say, congratulations for your work. I wish you to grow every day, to be more confident of your work, and to make sure that we can really shift to this green transition in our region. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tatiana, for your contribution. I think it's clear and known by all the attendants the key role that UNEP has played for many years in supporting the parties, the countries that are members of the Barcelona Convention. Probably the oldest international treaty to protect the regional sea. So now I'm glad to have also here with us, virtually, Mr. Patrick Wegert, who knows well the SwitchMed project and the European Union policy context under which this European Union flagship initiative has been established. I would have two questions to you, Patrick. The first one, if you allow me, would be about which are, according to your opinion, which are the challenges posed and the opportunities created by the Green Deal in relation to an inclusive circular economy. The floor is yours, Patrick.
Thank you, Enrique. Good morning, everybody. As Enrique said, I'm Patrick. My name is Patrick Wegert. I work at DG Environment of the European Commission, and I'm very happy to participate on behalf of the European Commission in the SwitchMed 2021 conference this morning. So I just want to give a few words on the developing policy context at EU level, which is relevant to the work and objectives of SwitchMed. And I hope then in the course of my presentation, I'll address the challenges. And also I think it's something that I could perhaps, I don't know if there's an opportunity to come back to it afterwards, but then also perhaps if there are questions on specific elements to it. So it's been highlighted by other speakers, and the countries of the Mediterranean, as we know, are close neighbours and key partners, and the EU recognises that environmental and climate challenges in the Mediterranean region are great and growing. So this meeting obviously comes at an important moment. In terms of the policy context, at the highest level, the EU sets out the approach for its relationship with what it calls the Southern Neighbourhood region, that is the Maghreb and Mashrek, in a communication entitled Renewed Partnership from February this year. This communication recognises the socio-economic, climate and environmental and security challenges faced in the region, and then highlights the opportunities for new partnerships on strategic priorities of green and digital transition. So it's seen, the green and digital transition is really seen as the principles and the pillars of future cooperation at the highest level in the region. In particular, relevant for the actions under SwitchMed, the communication then also identifies specifically promoting initiatives on waste management, including food waste and marine litter, supporting efforts to reduce emissions, in particular to marine and coastal environment, water and air, and also promoting the sustainable use of natural resources as a basis for achieving the transition to a circular economy. So if this communication establishes the broader policy framework, specifically in relation to environment and climate objectives in the region, 2 weeks ago, we saw the second ministerial meeting under the Union for the Mediterranean on environment and climate change. This followed up, the first ministerial meeting took place in 2014. So this was, from a policy perspective, long overdue, given all of the changes in the meantime, obviously the Paris Agreement in relation to climate change and the SDGs on sustainable development more broadly. The ministerial meeting was hosted by the government of Egypt, and it adopted a ministerial declaration which agreed on a common agenda to strengthen efforts in the Mediterranean region to urgently tackle the multiple climate and environmental challenges it faces. This commitment is important as it reflects a high level of ambition in accelerating the transition towards sustainable, climate neutral and green economies. The declaration highlights the need to develop policies and take necessary actions for the transition to a circular, green, inclusive and resource efficient economy, for the sustainable and integrated management of natural resources, as well as sustainable consumption and production patterns. So it's extremely relevant, obviously, for the work that's undertaken under SwitchMed. Just to reiterate some of the points that we made by the speakers as well, the facts speak for themselves on the climate change, on the climate pollution, diversity loss, and unsustainable resource use challenges that we are faced in the Mediterranean region and that have a detrimental effect on our lives and those of our children. It's clear, and the EU recognises, that business as usual means that these effects will affect our lives and livelihoods in ever more profound ways in the coming years. There are estimated 730 tons of plastic waste entering the Mediterranean every day, and these bear witness to an economic model that's out of sync with the planet. Water demand, as we've identified, is also increasing in the Mediterranean region, while water availability is decreasing. And water pollution is still a challenge to all of us, despite progress that's been made in wastewater treatment in the region more broadly. Air quality in the region is also under pressure, with more than 200,000 people estimated to die prematurely per year due to exposure to ambient air pollution. So this is just trying to identify some of the key elements which are also addressed, which were highlighted in the ministerial declaration. And as I said, the actions under SwitchMed can play a key role in addressing these challenges. At the EU level, the European Green Deal is aimed at spearheading global transition to climate neutral, clean and circular economies, where we curb pollution and protect and restore biodiversity. The Green Deal is intended to guide our economic recovery to build more inclusive and resilient societies. It's an effort to lead by example, to walk the walk, rather than just talk the talk. So now we have a climate law, making the goal of climate neutrality by 2050 legally binding. We've accelerated the pace of economic transformation. Last year, we adopted a new circular economy action plan to reduce our consumption footprint and double Europe's circular material use in the coming decade. The EU biodiversity strategy for 2030 is intended to make sure we put nature at the center of our decision making. But just as the challenges we face are global, the green transition must be global. We recognise that we need to engage even more closely with our immediate neighbours to scale up our cooperation on environment and the green economy and work together on seizing the opportunities of this transition. The opportunities are plentiful, so we must make Glasgow a success in the first instance. Just a few weeks later, as Tatiana's identified them, we meet at the conference of the parties of the Barcelona Convention, and we can take a big step forward by agreeing to make our common sea an emissions control area. A few months later, at the United Nations 5th Environmental Assembly, we'll be able to launch negotiations on a new global agreement on plastics. And still in spring next year, at COP15 of the Convention on Biological Diversity, we can finally put an ambitious post-2020 global biodiversity framework in place as an urgent step to put nature on the path to recovery. In conclusion then, given the need for closer regional cooperation on key environmental and climate issues, you could not ask for a clearer example than the Mediterranean of a region where we can only be successful if we all act together. And SwitchMed plays a very important contribution to this cooperation to achieve a cleaner Mediterranean for all. So I think if I just, in subsequent conclusion, if I highlight just a couple of elements in terms of the challenges. So I've given you, I hope, what's an overview of the policy framework from an EU perspective. I think in terms of the challenges, the real challenge that we face, I think, when we're talking about the European Green Deal is the need for a whole of government approach. So we come back to this question of integration. So ensuring that environment and climate change issues are effectively integrated into other policy areas, so transport, agriculture, etc. And there, as we know, the devil is in the detail. And those of you who are aware of the work that's going on under the Common Agricultural Policy, for example, will know that there's a big, it remains a big challenge to integrate environmental and climate change issues effectively. I think the other element is this aspect of ecosystem approaches, which is linked to integration. In this case, it's integrating biodiversity issues, again, more broadly into other policy areas. Addressing biodiversity and addressing climate change are really two sides of the same coin. And we can't achieve one without the other. And I think this is a message that we're passing very strongly in the lead up to Glasgow, the Glasgow Climate Change COP, that the need for nature-based measures for adaptation and mitigation. And then finally, I think the last point I would make in terms of a challenge is this challenge of doing no harm. And that will obviously require us having a shift in our mentality, particularly shifting then from harmful subsidies, so phasing out of harmful subsidies. I think those are really the key areas. In terms of specific sectors, and I think this is very relevant for SwitchMed, under the European Green Deal, under the Circular Economy Action Programme, we are developing legislation and policy for specific areas, whether it be textile, whether it be end-of-life product cycle, etc. We've seen legislation already on single-use plastics. So I think this is an area that we'll continue to work on. and it will be very relevant also for SwitchMed. And this is perhaps something that we can come back to at a future meeting, but I also advise those who are interested to have a look at, if you're interested in further information, then look at our website, and you can have details of those specific sectoral policy initiatives that are under consideration. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Patrick. Let me make you, in that sense, a second question, and it's about how do you think that specifically the circular economy action plan is influencing the neighborhood and enlargement policies of the European Union, and also which are the opportunities in that sense for the southern Mediterranean countries?
Thank you, Enrique. I think this is, as I said, the EU Green Deal really sets out the broader principles, and this has been highlighted by the Commission President von der Leyen. And it's really, when we're talking about this whole of government or this integrated approach, the European Green Deal, the objective really is to influence all different policy areas. And as I said, this is clearly, as we know, this is a challenge. I think there is still, I mean, there are grounds for optimism, and I think we are seeing changes. I had a meeting participated in a meeting with the Egyptian authorities a couple of weeks ago when we had this ministerial meeting in Cairo, and there we had the finance minister who was telling us about, for example, the green bond issuance that they had in Egypt recently. So I think this was encouraging in the sense of, as we know, the most effective advocates for the environment aren't from the environment ministries themselves. Often it's from the other ministries. It's where you have other ministries, whether it be transport, agriculture, finance, who are implementing and reflecting and highlight the challenges, and as well as the opportunities that this transition to a circular economy reflects or presents to us. So I think that's, as I said, that's, I think, one of the key areas. And as I've mentioned as well, what we will do under the Green Deal, what we are doing is then undertaking policy areas and proposals for specific sectors. And I think this is very important and will be important for the region. If you take, for example, proposals on textiles, so having a circular economy approach for textiles, given the importance of textiles in the region in particular, then that is also something where there's considerable opportunities for further exchanges in the future. And I'm talking about the environmental element, but as regards climate change and this shift to a low carbon approach, the carbon border adjustment mechanism, which is still under consideration but will evolve in the coming months and years, will also obviously, given the volume of trade between the EU and the southern neighbourhood, the carbon border adjustment mechanism will be also very, very significant for the region as a whole, and should act as a catalyst as well for low carbon growth.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you very much. I'm sorry we will have to cut here. Thank you much for your intervention and for your insightful contribution through your speech. So now let's move to our next guest, Ms. Alessandra Sensi from the Union for the Mediterranean. As all of you know, a key organization in the region, as well as strong supporter of SwitchMed. So Alessandra, I would, the same as with Patrick, I would make you two questions. The first one, which are, according to your opinion, the most relevant policy learnings and advancements in the field of green and circular economy transition achieved by the Union for the Mediterranean since the last edition of SwitchMed Connect that took place in 2018, and in that sense, how SwitchMed, on the other hand, has been also important in this development. So please, Alessandra, the floor is yours.
Many thanks, Enrique. I was actually trying to start the video. I don't know if the technicians can help me with that. For some reason, it doesn't show at the moment. But anyway, yeah, you can keep indeed on talking. It's a great pleasure actually to be here today and to have actually the opportunity with you all to in a certain way contribute. Sorry, I can now, let me just see. For some reason, yeah, it gets blocked. Anyway, I mean, it's a great pleasure really to be here with you all today and actually update you on all the developments at UFM level. Indeed, this year, 2021, has been particularly important in terms of the triplet of three ministerial on sustainable blue economy, energy, environment, and climate action that the UFM countries, so the 42 countries belonging to the UFM system, Euro-Mediterranean countries, managed to adopt. The first one, sorry, I'm trying to still see with the video, for some reason it doesn't work.
Yeah, sorry, Alessandra, our colleagues from technical support are trying to fix the problem, but in the meantime, we really appreciate you can go on with your presentation. So sorry for that.
So never mind. I mean, as long as we can talk, this is very important. So all these three ministerial, of course, address and work around the principle of green and circular economy, which are actually the core of our activities for the years to come. In all these, for us, SwitchMed has been a driver for green and circular economy. Let's go back to 2014, where actually SwitchMed was indicated and assigned as an operational pillar for a green circular economy in the South Mediterranean. That was just actually the start of a much long-term process, which we are all now experiencing and leading together. As it was recalled yesterday, at the time the SDGs were still not there, and we believe actually that the Mediterranean at large made a very important contribution in this respect. So where do we stand now? The current developments of SwitchMed actually do go in line with the ministerial decision by the 42 countries, and even the priorities set within the blue economy work are in a certain way very well reflected also by the new component of blue economy that SwitchMed Connect has been able to embrace. However, let's say going from policy to operational, all the UFM programming has been set around it, and we, let's say, through our, in a certain way, seed support, the UFM is not a donor, but is a facilitator of process. We have been actually pushing to ensure the continuity of the process over time. Let's remember also, you know, all the support given through the working group to the second phase of SwitchMed. But again, we think this is just, you know, the start of a long-term process. So we facilitated fundraising, technical assistance, upscaling of activities to other countries, mobilization of partnership and actors indeed in support of these endeavor. It was just mentioned actually that Patrick also, you know, the example of plastic is a typical example which we have invested a lot of energies and which indeed provided very good results we see now. Again, results of benefit of the entire region. So where we see now SwitchMed being placed, we think that it has been very important actually for the Southern Mediterranean. We now believe that what needs to be built at the Mediterranean level is a critical mass. So in this respect, actually the issues of partnership that were mentioned by other actors is indeed particularly important. We believe that upscaling is also very important, as well as acceleration. And acceleration is something that, of course, with the boost of the Green Deal at European level, we will manage to lever also through the very recent communication that Patrick just mentioned. So these are the three aspects that we are focusing on, together with what was already mentioned, the partnership with other programs, the Interact Green Growth, with other financing tool, of course, CBC, PIMA, BlueMed, and of course, I mean, also other partners, which are the historical partners we have of SwitchMed, but also, for example, with other new partners like FAO, where we are indeed trying to tackle sectorial challenges, as mentioned by Patrick, that is indeed agriculture and fish are important sectors we tackle in order, let's say, ensure the mainstream actually of the green and circular economy principles, methodologies, practices more in depth, and this is actually where we are starting from. I'd like maybe just to finalize my answer to your question by saying that the Mediterranean has become actually an example and a pilot for other regions of the world. So the international agenda will actually favor this, the continuation of these activities, but we have also experienced a lot. We have a lot to give, but of course it's time for us to concentrate also more the efforts on practices. So the next efforts will have to be indeed to upscale practical cases and ensure that they are absorbed, let's say, at all levels from regional to national.
Thank you very much, Alessandra, for answering to this first question. Let me now to make a second one, which is about, as you perfectly know, it's about the last interministerial conference of the UFM that was gathering the 42 member countries of the institution, and took place in Egypt. So I wanted to ask you about which are, according to your point of view, the main outcomes, the main takeaways from the conference, and also the ones. I mean, what let's say the declaration that was finally adopted by the conference would mean in terms of continued support to the region in this line about protecting the region. The region's environment, climate change, and in that sense, contributing to a more circular economy.
Yeah, thank you very much, Rick. Indeed, I will start by referring to what Patrick just said. I mean, we had the Ministerial Environment and Climate Action on the 4th of October. As you can imagine, the focus was very much on the COPs, Biodiversity COP and Climate Change COP. In a certain way, the Ministerial is recognizing all what actually those that are working in the area know since many years. But indeed, I mean, backing all this with very important facts and figures. Not by chance, you know, the Mediterranean is now officially recognized as one of the mostly affected regions in terms of biodiversity loss, climate change. We know that the climate change, let's say, acceleration is 20% faster than other regions of the world. So based on all these facts and figures, the focus by countries was on more implementation means, capacity development, green climate finance, technology transfer. The need indeed to converge efforts to accelerate the transition, recognizing that this transition actually is already happening. Another important point was indeed on going more local. Another very important point was indeed on the fact that it's not a phase for austerity, it's time for spending, for recovering, even especially after the post-COVID, you know, the economies of the region, but doing that in a sustainable and transparent manner. So sustainability and all the work that has been done in terms of taxonomy and sustainable green and blue finance has to become a practice. And again, I mean, as a final point, that the transition cannot be done alone. The Ministerial itself endorsed as a main pillar for future action the UFM Greener Med agenda and climate change work plan. As you know, the climate change agenda is based on three main axes. One is indeed the green, circular, and social inclusive economy, indeed based on sustainable consumption, production, resource efficiency, and nature-based solution. Then on pollution, with a focus on pollution prevention. This comes also from the past, from 2024, when our focus has been indeed to move from pure depollution to pollution prevention, linking with climate change. And last but not least, for sure, conservation and restoring of our natural resources and ecosystem. It was a strong message by Egypt as president of COP14. It was just moved to China COP15, and I'm about to close. Indeed, that we don't have, again, to work on the very different, convention, but again, make an extra effort to make sure that we work on this all together.
Thank you, Alessandra. Sorry, I should ask you to start ending your presentation because we are running out of time. Sorry for that.
That's fine, and thank you very much for the invitation and for being here. Bye.
It has been a pleasure, Alessandra. So we had plenty of insightful ideas and contribution in this hour through the intervention of our three distinguished colleagues. As you know, they represent institutions that have been, are, and will be key in centralizing the efforts of all the Mediterranean countries, and not only the countries of our region, but also the ones that are constituting the so-called Euro-Mediterranean region, just progressing more and more in this common objective towards circular and sustainable economies. Now, I would just ask you to please stay with us and join one of the track conference of the day to listen to more than 40 experts, practitioners, and beneficiaries from the SwitchMed community and other key organizations in the region reflecting on industrial sustainability, green entrepreneurship, sustainable finance, and policy development. After the track conference and a brief break, we will be announcing the winners of the WeMed Award. As probably many of you know, the first Mediterranean Award celebrating eco-innovation and green entrepreneurship. The awarding ceremony will start at 14:30 CEST and will make you aware of the latest eco-innovative projects and how they are shaping the future of businesses. I would like to thank again our speakers and all the SwitchMed stakeholders and beneficiaries who work with big efforts to make the sustainable transition happen. It's a pleasure being with you all today. So thank you, and talk later. Bye.
Recording stopped.